All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is David Ragland. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I'm one of the co-executive directors of the Truth Telling Project. And the work that I work on in Truth Telling Project is focused on reparations and our core culture. And I want to just share a little bit about the radical truth teller. And I'm really proud of the folks who are radical truth tellers because we really started this project because of our experience in Ferguson, not seeing activists who are doing radical work being supported. And so what we began this project and we called it Support a Activist. And what we initially did was we raised money for a month for any activist who came to us who's doing good work and said they needed some support. And that that work merged into the Radical Truth Teller Award. And it was because we wanted to highlight activists who were doing this work and provide them with some resources and support them in whatever activity or fundraise for whatever thing that they were interested in. And we also thought it was important, especially in our time, to support people who continuously stand up and tell the truth, no matter how popular or unpopular it may be, and to lend our platform to those activists. And so it is a pleasure for me to introduce you all to YahNé. And I met YahNé in Ferguson in 2019. When she came to St. Louis and Ferguson for the 5th anniversary of Mike Brown's murder and the uprising in Ferguson, but also our grassroots reparations convening. And since that time, I've been happy to be in contact with YahNé as one of the core organizers of BLM in Philly and Black Alliance for Peace, which is an organization that I have deep respect for. And I share a lot of values in common with. But YahNé also helped to launch the Black Philly Radical Collective and is pushing toward accountability, this accountability process of hashtag BLM 10 plus. Also, I have the honor to be a part of Ubuntu Freedom, which is a collective living and community group that is really looking at how do we build freedom for Black and Brown and Indigenous folks. So in addition to, working around political prisoners, housing justice, ability inclusiveness, YahNé is just a really dope organizer and thinker and strategist that I'm proud to know. And I want to just give a moment to welcome YahNé and give you the opportunity to share a little bit about your work, who you are with the group, and what's important to you in this particular moment.
Awesome, thank you. It's good to see you, Dave. And it's good to see all the names on the screen. I definitely would love to welcome anyone to peek out a face, a smile, just, adds a little feeling of warmth in the space, but there's no pressure because, you're here in the way that you feel comfortable, and that's important. But definitely appreciate some, some faces. It's really great. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. This is Vision. This is my puppy. We've been on the road, so we literally got into the house 2 minutes before, like I was trying to get the Wi-Fi password 2 minutes before we got here. So she's just a little bit in a freaked out state, like, where are we? So I'm trying to make sure that she doesn't act too crazy in the background while we're here talking. But so tell you all a little bit about myself and what's important to me. I'm a freedom fighter. Freedom is important to me. And, you know, most of the things that I do are really connected to that. I was built nonconformist. It's one of the reasons why I really connect with the millennial and younger generations, because they are like, fuck this system and these processes that people are imposing. Like, I know who I am. I can define myself. I can choose, you know, for myself. And I was operating from that place from a young age, and I was supported in doing that. I was supported in like really being self-determined, you know, at a time when that wasn't really something that people understood. And the thing about that is that it gave me a different relationship with like what it means to be free. And I just really want everybody, I feel like, you know, I know we all deserve it. We're born with freedom, and we all deserve to be able to experience that freedom. And so, you know, I fight for that. And there are a couple of ways, like I recently, you know, I feel like I'm just going to end up rambling because I have like, just tell me about yourself and what's important to you. But I want to try to think of ways to do that, to exemplify that are personal. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my daughter, who's really important to me, and my approach for raising her. Some people would think it was a little crazy that I could not be a really authoritarian kind of person with her, which that's what you think about for your children. The parent is the authority. But I always saw her autonomy. I always saw her personhood. And I raised her and was intentional about giving her room and space to fully be herself and to define herself and be self-determined. And I think that that's like very core to who I am and how I engage with people. And when people are not able to be free, when people are not able to define themselves, then I'm very aggressive about going about like challenging the things that get in the way of people's right to be free. And so I'm going to pull my puppy. Just give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm going to just hold her. So some of the things that I've been a part of, you know, I went through a range of actions and activities in getting to the place that I am now as it relates to like the way that I approach the organizing work that I do. And so I started off just kind of volunteering as a child, like tutoring and candy striping, you know, and just connecting with like the kids on the corners, introducing them to books. Then I did some volunteering at a local high school. I worked with the young people who were not desired by their teachers, and, you know, and just connected with them. I'm actually still in touch with some of those young people. Well, they were only like 4 years younger than me at that time, because I was starting undergrad and they were starting, you know, high school, but I'm still in touch with some of those people. I started high school in 1990. And then I just did some nonprofit work and really was kind of dealing with like my own experiences of poverty, not coming out of poverty. I came from a very solid working class community, but then I began to confront poverty myself and judge myself a lot about it because I didn't come from, you know, that kind of experience. So I had already kind of been programmed to believe that people were poor because of things of their own doing. And I didn't understand at that time that poverty was an imposed condition. And And so, but still like only wanting to do work that I thought was meaningful. And so working like in nonprofit areas and things like that. And I began to be frustrated because I could tell that like, even if I helped somebody to get out of a particular situation, there were so many people to fill that situation. It was just kind of like this ongoing thing. And I began to be really more like interested in what was causing the conditions that I was seeking to address, and began to understand more about like the money system, began to understand more about capitalism. I did study African American studies at Temple University. So I was introduced to, certain kinds of literature, through that, and like historical literature and things of that nature. I mean, I was raised in a very pro-Black community. My mom, when we would have to write, they'd say, write a biography. And she would say, write it about Sojourner Truth or, Wilma Rudolph. And so from very young ages, I was always being introduced to, our culture and our history. But I was able to dive deeper when I was at my undergraduate studies, and just went through like a series of activities, supported, Obama. I did, supported, went into some of the electoral campaigns and thinking, working with elected officials and thinking that I would be able to make a change and transformation happen in that way. And then, beginning to realize that, as we now all say, like the system is not broken, it works the way that it's supposed to, and began to just be obsessed. Well, I was consistently obsessed with one of my primary obsessions from childhood was about hunger. There were, if anybody on here was around in the 70s, you may remember all of the commercials that will come on about children who were starving from the droughts in Ethiopia, and seeking to resolve that. And that combined with seeing some of the conditions that some of my family members were in, where they were actually, I didn't grow up poor, but I had family members that were poor, and seeing what they were going through and my love for them and seeing what these children were going through was a thing that really affected my heart. And I think that's why I was doing the volunteer work that I described and all of those things. And then I got to a place where I realized that if I really wanted to contribute to the development of a world in which there were no people who were hungry at all, that I was going to that I wasn't going to be able to do it by trying to transform the system that's in place, that we needed to eradicate that system. But it was very clear to me also that if you eradicate a system, you have to be prepared. If you're eradicating a system that's put in place by an oppressive force, you have to be prepared with an alternative, or that oppressive force is going to replace whatever you tear down with a new variation, something that will continue to empower them. And so I began to work on the development of projects that was very much focused on the alternative and the building of the alternative in particular. And so on one hand, I was working with a lot of organizers. I began to work with organizers like through Black Lives Matter Philly, and through the Black Alliance for Peace, and the development of Black Philly Radical Collective, and working with like Mobilization for Mumia, working with the folks to bring Maroon home, which we did, right? So that's something we should definitely be celebrating. We were able to bring our Baba home. He's ill, so it is bittersweet, but he is home. And he is seeing his children and his grandchildren and his siblings. And, that's immensely important. But just doing that work, we got to get the rest of our political prisoners home. We have to look out for our aging prisoners, our ailing prisoners. And we also have to do the work of transforming the way that, like, we are here. I don't know if everyone that's on this call is here in the US, but in the US, we sit in the seat of power and the seat of evil. And so we have to take responsibility in recognizing the ways that this place that we're in, the system that we are subject to, and that we in different ways support and contribute to, even if we don't like it, that system is actually murdering people all over the planet And especially, there's, as the Black Alliance for Peace says, that we have to end the war on Black African people in the US and abroad, because we are at war. And, and that's something that is important for us to make sure that people know and understand, and that they therefore know that they're on one side or the other side of a war. And so, I do that work of, like, as George Jackson said, raising the revolutionary consciousness of our community, and try to do that in a range of ways. And at the same time, do the work of building freedom and working to build freedom with an amazing community of organizers from around the country. And so as it relates to that, the primary organizing space through which I'm working at this moment is Ubuntu Freedom. And one of the things that we've done recently is we worked for a little over a year on the development of principles called Principles of Freedom. And there are a couple people that are on this call that could drop a link to the Principles of Freedom. So I'll invite you to check those out. But we worked on these principles for a little over a year with organizers from all over the country. And the reason behind the principles and the importance of the principles is that for myself and many of the other organizers, we found that as we work, as we interact with each other, that there seemed to be a very unified vision for freedom, that a lot of people saw freedom in the same way. I was doing different workshops and things, and I would encounter people who were saying things that I thought as it relates to, what we need and what it looks like when we're free. And so we wanted to represent what we perceive to be a unified vision for freedom through these principles. And the principles of freedom, therefore, they represent that vision, but they also represent and are a call for people to actually build it and systematize the principles. And so what we are looking forward to is a time when people can see, and it's already starting, but growing this time where people see these principles and they're able to say, yeah, that is actually what I see for freedom. And they adopt the principles, and then they know that anyone else who's done that has the same vision. Because one thing that I remember learning long time ago, about 20 years ago, there was a statement that said, vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision is just marking time. Vision with action can change the world. And the important thing is that you have to have vision, right? And so, like, us having a collective vision for freedom is one piece of that, so that our actions are all operating in that same direction. It's like if in order for Google Maps to work for you, you have to be able to tell it where you're going, right? So the purpose of the Principles of Freedom is to have us all have like the same destination and be clear that we have the same destination. So then if I'm working to systematize the first principle, food is freedom, then I can be knowing that I'm building towards the same understanding, and I can be connecting with other people who are doing that or who are working on other principles, but we know we're working in harmony with each other, and we know we're working towards the same thing. And so there's a full strategy that we have for how we want to actually build this vision for freedom into a physical reality all around the world. But ultimately, what we want to do is invite people to begin to build within their communities, build systems that embody the principles, and then to be able to connect all of those organizations and communities with each other, because we know that this stuff is already happening, and we're not here thinking that we're the inventors, but we don't see enough connection. So if you have 50 communities that are actually doing this kind of work, but they're isolated, they're not able to have the same kind of success, nor are they able to have the same kind of impact on the world that they do when each community becomes 50 times bigger by being connected to the others that are doing the same thing. And so that's what we're seeking to do, is to help to to build the mechanisms that enable people who are building freedom to be able to see it that way, to see that what they're doing is building freedom, and then to also be able to connect with others that know that they're doing that and see that they're doing that. And then for us to, at the same time, be supporting what people are doing in addressing the current systems that so many of us and our people are still subject to. So still supporting people who are, of course, that's why we still work to free all of our political prisoners and to abolish all of the prisons and to abolish the police. The 13 demands for the Black Philly Radical Collective that I was one of the three lead co-authors of, that those principles are a vision for abolition and for like steps to get our community in Philadelphia to a place where we don't have police at all. And so, you know, even if the city of Philadelphia doesn't adopt or respond to all of those demands, we're also inviting our community members to have discussions. Of course, we have community members who are like, what will we do if we don't have police? But that's great, ask the question, so then we can begin to tease out those answers together and find solutions and understand that we don't need systems that were built to oppress us and try to transform those. We can actually just build completely new systems that have the intentions that these other systems are pretending that they have, that will actually meet our needs. So we deal with the dismantling of the system and the ideas of dismantling the system while we also build practical examples of what alternatives can look like. So people can't say, well, this is not possible. They'll know it's possible because they can walk, they can go to this community, they can take a ride to that community, they can go online and see a video from this other community and see that people are actually doing things in a different way, where this community will not allow anyone to be unhoused, that is absolutely unacceptable in this community. None of us are free unless all of us are free. None of us are free if we have people who we have to walk over, we have to step over on the street. So this community here does everything it needs to do to make sure that it always has more housing than the people that are there. So anybody who comes there has a house and they can work on building or however their process is, but it happens. This community here feeds everybody in this community, and then it feeds 50% of the people in, whatever larger area around that community. And so it's happening, and the people are not having to sell themselves or they have to sell their labor away from their family, away from their community, that people are not going to these poor schools that are not made to educate us, but are made to program us, and instead are educating their children in these other kinds of ways, and their children are growing up brilliant. It's wonderful that we have examples within our own community of children who have been unschooled and are also amazing, so that people can know that you don't have to be afraid. The system teaches us that if you don't depend on it and you don't work through its processes and its procedures, that you're going to literally definitely fall on your face and die. And we can demonstrate that that's not what's going to happen, that you will actually thrive, and that you can have a community where you see everyone around you thriving, and that this system does not have to be in place. And so that's really like just a little bit about like some of my thinking and my processing and some of the work that I do. I still work with with Black Lives Matter Philly organizers. I'm very close to them. I stepped back simply because I needed to focus more on the work of Ubuntu Freedom, and just as it relates to capacity and being fair to myself as well. But I still support Black Lives Matter Philly and my comrades there. I still support the accountability process with that. I don't know if anybody is aware of the accountability process that some of the chapters in Black Lives Matter, and it's not only in Black Lives Matter, like in Black Lives Matter and other national organizing spaces, people are calling to account the way that people are taking leadership and how they're moving forward with leadership. And if they are actually working as representatives of the people who they're claiming to be the leaders of, or if they're misleading people, which is what we that were a part and have been a part of the BLM 10+, the chapters that called for the accountability of the Black Lives Matter Global Network. We believe that those people were not actually, were misleading our community and actually de-revolutionizing our community. And that's absolutely not okay. We were in an amazing place in 2020, when the communities were saying, we are done with this oppressive reality, and we're going to turn it over. And Black Lives Matter Global Networks was actually used, one of the tools that was used to kind of like dampen the revolutionary spirit of people who were like, we don't know what to do though, and then they're being led by people who they think are the experts of revolution to do things that are not at all revolutionary. And we can't allow that to continue to happen. We have to, again, raise the revolutionary consciousness, not decrease the revolutionary consciousness of our people. And so I still support that work and definitely support the Black Alliance for Peace. I feel that the Black Alliance for Peace is one of the most important national Black-led organizations in the country in this moment. And so definitely support the Black Alliance for Peace, continue to work with the Black Alliance for Peace, but the primary work that I do, and again, still work with around housing justice, still work around food justice, and still working very closely with the communities. I mean, when it comes to freeing our political prisoners, like if we let them capture any of us and then we don't fight for them, then we are making ourselves vulnerable. We're telling anybody else who may want to organize that we will forget you. And we just aren't honoring, we aren't honoring ourselves in the fight if we just let them take us, any member of our community, and then we just move forward and don't do anything about it. So that's really, really important to me. There are a lot of people who have been returned to our communities now. We can learn so much from them, but we have to bring more of them home. And we can't bring them home just to die. We have to bring them home in time for them to be able to thrive. And so I do that work. And at the same time, my primary work is through Ubuntu Freedom that I was describing to you all before. So is that about what you were looking for in the description?
Ashe is all I got to say. Ashe, ashe, ashe. But definitely, and I feel what you said was so powerful. Just the pieces around accountability. And I have my own stories and organizing, around that as well. I want to start us off with a question, but I also want to give other people a chance to ask questions. But before we do that, I want to ask if you would be open to sharing your Venmo or anything that you would like folks to donate to yourself. I encourage you to accept, Venmos to yourself as well, because we individually have to be sustained as well. But however you want to do that, if you could share that in the chat. And I want to encourage folks to support YahNé and whatever link she puts down. But one of the questions that came up for me as you were talking was around solidarity, particularly, and if you can speak a little bit more about like American exceptionalism, and even in our movements, American exceptionalism, and like the connections that we need to have to our family in the Black diaspora around the world as well. And I want to also open it up for other questions after you respond as well. So.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, solidarity, I think, is an interesting word because of like there's so many different ways that we think about it, and like sometimes are we being in solidarity, or are we actually just recognizing that these are people we already are in community with and we are reconnecting? But I think that particularly as it relates to the international, the reality of like the global human community, as it relates to the war against Black life and against Indigenous peoples all around the world. I think that one of the things, and this is one of the reasons why I think actually the Black Alliance for Peace is so important, one of the things that that BAP focuses on that I think is super important is drawing the connections, that they're not separate wars. that there's not one war against Black people in Jamaica and a different war against Black people in Haiti and a different war against, Black people in Rwanda or in Nigeria or in Uganda, and then a whole different one against Black people here in the US. It's the same war, and they use different tactics and they use different processes for their different landscapes. And so when we understand that we're actually responding to the same one enemy, the same enemy that caused Mike Brown to be shot and left in the street, is the same enemy that caused Museveni to be reinstalled in spite of, as a dictator in Uganda. Is the same enemy that has a blockade against Venezuela, that has a blockade against Cuba, is the same enemy that that took advantage of or took down the Haitian president in the midst of all of the unrest that's happening in Haiti. And so, and actually, there's the program, the 1033 program here in the US, where actually the same weapons that are being used by soldiers and our soldiers in other countries are then redistributed to police forces and used against us. So you'll have a gun that was pointed at and shot at Palestinians, in Palestine, and then turn around and those same guns are now in, if not our own direct local police forces, in police forces that are close to our Blacker cities. So maybe it's not in Philadelphia, maybe it's in another police district that's close to Philadelphia, so that if we're in rebellion, they can bring their tanks here, and they're not that far away, because they literally are giving, there are police stations now that have tanks. And the streets of Philadelphia had tanks that were shooting canisters at grandmas on their porches in our Black communities in the city of Philadelphia. And so we have to recognize that we actually are comrades, with the individuals that are fighting against oppression and violence in other parts of the world, and that we are fighting the same enemy, and we just have to use different tactics. And that, again, is something that George Jackson talks about, is the difference, that the guerrilla warfare is that they can't, if we actually had a strong guerrilla war tactical process, that it has to be re-established, or has to be put together in a way that takes the particular landscape that you're in mind. So maybe you're not in mountains, and maybe there aren't caves, maybe you're in an urban environment in the US, but that regardless, that if you use that practically, that the people who already are in the mindset that revolution is necessary, there is enough that, we think that we can't win. We're always under the impression that we can't win. We really actually are able to win. We just aren't. It's not our numbers, and it's not our technology, it's our discipline. And so if we organize better and we increase our discipline, we actually have, in this moment right now, all that we need in order to assert and establish the freedom of all people. And so we need to know that and understand that, so that we can actually do the necessary work together. We can inspire each other and do the work together to actually make it happen. Because I'm determined. I'm 49, I'm turning 50 in April. So, I am determined to see the transformation. I am not ready to be going to that transition into the next phase of my spirit's life, and with the knowledge that there are still children hungry anywhere on this planet. I'm not okay with that. So we got to get ourselves together so that we can make sure that everybody, and it's children is a big focus for me because of how I was introduced to hunger, but nobody should be hungry, whether they're a child, whether they're a full-fledged adult, moving towards the end of their youth like me, or, a senior. No one should be hungry. No one should be sleeping on the street unless that's just their job. If that's your jam, that's your jam, but if you want a house or a home and shelter in a certain kind of way, then it's there for you. And we've got plenty of housing, so everybody should have it. And we keep building all of this luxury housing, and we keep building. In Venezuela, even during this time of sanctions, when the US has kept from Venezuela so many hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, they have built hundreds of thousands of housing units for their community. They still have been building, like kind of like community gardens, so that they're able to provide the food needs through these community-owned gardens for their whole community. Even within the context of sanctions, where they don't have access to their resources, that's what they are doing. And so we can do that. We don't need to have a system in place that enables people to have 10, 100. There are people who have hundreds of homes that own themselves, hundreds of properties, and are profiting off of the most basic right that people have, the need and the right to housing. It's absolutely unconscionable. It's illegitimate. It's illegal in the reality of what is true scientific or universal law. And we don't need to continue to subject ourselves to that. We need to say no, we need to turn our back to that, and we need to show each other how to do it by building something new, building something that is just. And so I'm sorry, I'm just like want to preach on a little bit of a soapbox, but I really just know that we can do it. I absolutely know that it's completely possible, and we just have to help each other to sit squarely in that knowledge and to build with that knowledge. And Ubuntu says we are connected. There's no me without you. I don't even exist if you aren't in existence. So that's the solidarity perspective that I operate with. And strategically, I might operate differently with you versus you based on some of the cultural and programming realities that we have to deal with. But I don't make those kinds of decisions ever forgetting that we're actually all the same spirit.
Deeply appreciate it. And I have more questions, but I want to give other folks a chance to chime in as well.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thank you so much for your talk, and thank you for your time. So have you heard, there's this group of, it's like, I think mothers, I forget the name of their name, but it's this organization over in Oakland, where it's like a group of moms. Yeah. How do you feel about their work and bringing that kind of like into?
I'm all about it. I work with people who do takeover housing. We had a housing encampment in Philadelphia. I camped at that encampment. I pitched a tent and stayed with that encampment. I was there with them until the encampment was disembarked, and we moved people into houses. And so I totally believe in takeover housing, 100%. I believe that it's, a lot of people in the city of Philadelphia who do that focus on properties that are owned by the city of Philadelphia, because the city of Philadelphia itself owns enough property for housing to house all the unhoused people there, and just leave them empty and let them dilapidate until they can sell them to developers. And they use actually the housing authority as a form of gentrification in communities as they're working to gentrify the city of Philadelphia. So in Philadelphia, people generally go for those properties and when they're going to take over housing. But I'm like, my mind has already been like, let's just all go and just like, we live here now, we don't pay rent. And like, you own 100 properties, now you own 2. Like, that's my mindset around that. Like, I just think that they assert their laws on us. And the laws, Mumia talks about the laws, and he says the laws mean whatever white men want it to mean. And it applies to whomever they want it to apply to. And so they don't apply those laws to themselves, and we allow them to apply them to us. We can create our own laws and we can apply them to them. We just have to have heart, and we have to have organization, and we have to have discipline.
All right. I completely agree. I think part of what we miss out is a lack of creativity. We don't think that it's possible, or many of us.
Yeah, well, George Jackson talks about how the education system teaches people what to think instead of teaching people how to think. And, and so that we end up being so limited by being told by what our imagination, like what we are allowed to imagine. And actually there's a book that I read and I'm always promoting called A Happy Pocket Full of Money, which is a wealth consciousness book. And one of the lines that's in that book that really resonates with me, in fact, I remembered the line when I was reading the book before I came across the line, reading it 20 years after I had read it the first time, which is life is images of the mind expressed. And so when you think about like what you see, the image that you see in your mind and what you really hold in your mind, that is what you actually end up manifesting as your life. And you think about us as a community and who it is that gives us the images of our mind. And then you think about what we're living, it's all completely connected. So we have to like really take control of it. And we can't forget the spiritual. They try to disconnect us from our spiritual realities, but the spiritual is the most powerful part of our life and of ourselves. And so we have to connect the spiritual to the organizing that we're doing as well.
Can you say a little bit about that? Because for me, my feeling is that this struggle, like the spiritual is the most important piece, right? That's where the discipline comes in, because for me, it's our ancestors that are helping us to get free, right? That connection, that strength, that vision, because it was a dream that my ancestors gave me that for me is pushing a lot of the work and a lot of the abundance in the work. But especially, and because I heard you talk about discipline, right? And then I was thinking about the master's tools, right? And that conversation right there. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, when I often think about Haiti when I think about this, because how could those unresourced Black people beat that Napoleon's Navy? Like, how did they do that, right? And we think about Haiti also when you think about like, that's where you think about like stuff like voodoo and and, you know, and the spiritual practices that have from us, for our own people, have been looked down on, have been, have been considered, like just like the worst kind of spiritual kind of place that you could go into. I feel like there's an intentional disconnecting of us from our ancestral spiritual practices, and that our ancestral spiritual practices do connect us to our ancestors and to the spirit. And so there's a range of ways and a range of approaches, I believe, in tapping into the spiritual. But if you are not empowered to actually connect to the spiritual practices that resonate with you and the powers and the gifts that you are born with, then I think then you're limited in your ability to actually be empowered. So like somebody may like really be able to be spiritually empowered through the practice, the discipline practices and study of Islam, right? And I have like a housemate who is Muslim, and they always go into their room to pray, before each thing. They identify ways that they fell out from that, and that works for them. But that's more of an accepted practice now, and at least in some communities, but that might not be the way. Like I come from psychics. And so some of the people who are in my family, like my grandmother's sister, you drink from a glass of water, you sit in front of her, she can read you your whole life. But somebody else, it might be cards that is the vehicle that they're able to use to get to, seeing and learning and hearing certain things. For somebody else, it may be certain kinds of beads or some other kind of medium. And so recognizing that we have these variations on all the different aspects of our spirit, can help us to be and allowing ourselves to be able to explore and make those connections, and then to support people having the discipline that's needed within the context of their spiritual practice, and normalizing that without like imposing and using it to hurt and harm each other, which is what we often see happening through religion as opposed to spiritual practices. I think those are some of like my initial thoughts as it relates to that. And I hope that answers your question, Dave. Or at least begins to.
Definitely. I think when you brought up Haiti, like that also helped me as well. And I saw Latrice's hand up, and I think Shirley wanted to say something, because Shirley is a activist and a Haitian as well. And
I saw the person who has the Truth Telling Project as their identity. I think that they were also trying to say something as well.
So can we hear from Josh? I mean, can we hear from Latrice, Josh, Shirley, and then Melinda, and then maybe just if you can say your comment, and if you can maybe answer all at once, if that's cool.
Sure.
Okay.
So my question was more so just how do you feel the environmental crisis is impacting housing for where you are? Because of course, the more areas that are affected, and we know, historically that it affects, poor Black people the most. So just in your experience, how do you feel like that would impact the housing movement?
Josh, go ahead.
My question is more related to lessons that you learned from the struggle to free Ruben Schultz, to free Mumia, and basically what you think we need to know going forward in our struggle to abolish prisons and support political prisoners.
Hey, Shirley.
So my question was just more of a statement. As far as like voodoo in Haiti, I definitely feel, like, unfortunately, like I've just started seeing like different studies being done on how voodoo has been so demonized because of the Haitian Revolution. And I say unfortunately because there's like a deep shame in some places of like voodoo, in the Haitian culture. I remember my uncle, my family's Catholic, and I remember my uncle married a Protestant woman, and there's still like that whole big Protestant Catholic drama. And the first thing my grandmother says was, "Oh, she probably does voodoo." And I'm like, calm down. The Catholics do more voodoo than the Protestants. But yeah, it's just such deep shame, and it really takes us away from like some ancestral practices, while at the same time there are some things that are so ingrained in Haitian culture that it's like, you know what I mean, you just can't, it's like you can't, like, people don't want to acknowledge it, but then they can't get away from it at the same time.
I just want to say I was proud to learn that I have Haitian heritage. When I went to explore my heritage in the Bahamas, I went to the island that my great grandparents were from, Cat Island, which is related to Sidney Poitier. So I'm proud of that as well. And found out that one of my ancestors had migrated there from Haiti. And so I have Haitian, and I also learned as an adult that I have Cuban heritage. So I'm just born revolutionary, right? Melinda, I know you wanted to say something.
Hey, we met in Ferguson, and I was blown away then by your beauty and your embodied power. So it's great to have you here tonight with us. My question is more of a summary question. I'm interested in what it is that allows people to change and transform and to reinvent and reshape their ideas. So I'm curious, since the Ferguson, the 5th year anniversary of Mike Brown's murder and the first reparations campaign gathering, what in 3 words or 3 sentences influenced the changes that you've made in the last couple of years? What motivated you to make these shifts in your direction.
All right, awesome. So I did take notes on everybody's questions. So as it relates to the environmental crisis, it's really, really, I mean, we know it's super substantial. And I often feel like I'm in a race against the environmental crisis and technology. Like, are they going to get to the point where they can inject nano, materials in us and can control us and make us their slaves? I was recently at a workshop where there was a brother who is does mushroom cultivating and all of that sort of thing. And it's related to the environment because, mushrooms, how they can grow and what they can provide as a meat alternative. For example, if we start running out of things, like there's what mushrooms can do to feed people is really important to know and understand, and also the medicinal benefits of mushrooms. And so we were meeting there, but one of the things we talked about is how one of these mushrooms have some element in it that makes it able to take over insects and control their bodies so that they can so that the insects can move to other locations where they would be able to release spores and make more mushrooms, but that it's very nefarious in that it's not controlling the mind. So you can imagine if your mind is aware and wants to do whatever you want to do, and you think whatever you think, but your body is doing whatever somebody else wants you to do. So that has been sticking in my mind, as a frightening potential, like the kinds of things that I feel like our enemies will be working towards. And so I feel like I'm rushing against technology and what they may do that way. And wow, thank you, that biomimicry. Okay, I'm gonna look that up and study that a little bit more. But wow, Jameer, that you just watched a video on that an hour ago. That's pretty amazing. But so I worry and think about that. And I also think about, of course, the climate crises. And that's part of why I feel like these communities that we're building, that people are building in our community that are in the North, seem to be like a really important way to go. Thinking about elevation of different locations, thinking about and being creative about how we think. Like I've been thinking about like boats and like man-made islands. Like I saw something that had where a person like built their own little island. So they had their house and they had land around it. They were growing things and all of that in a body of water. And, and so like, I think that it's really important. Like we can't stave off what's happening at this point. It's important for us to be thinking creatively about other ways that we can live with the understanding of the projections of what's going to be going on. Like I could sit here and do my best to Blackify some neighborhood in Germantown. I'm always like, we got to negrify Germantown. In Philadelphia, or and all of that, and build up the Black community. And Philadelphia is going to be underwater. So is that really the thing to do? So like thinking about where we need to be engaging in building differently. I think is, and as it relates to not just like the housing crisis but communities, just like where will our communities be? I don't want us to be in a place where we end up scrambling. And as a result of that, also being separated from each other. Like we need to build together so that we don't end up just trying to fit into something that other people have built that once again is not for us. So that's kind of like my thinking around that concept and around that issue. Is we've really got to tap into our creativity, and we've got scientists in our community, and and then when I say our community, I'm talking about like us who are aligned. They're operating with an alignment around like the vision and the alignment of like caring and loving the humanity of people everywhere, and that who love life and want to protect life. That all of us have to be tapping into our skill sets, learning and understanding what's coming, and building and thinking creatively in response to those future realities. But not at all should we just give up and let our people die. So we've got to be proactive. And those people the people who are on this call potentially, and people who are taking any kind of leadership, have to take responsibility for our position as the vanguard, and we can't let it fail. We have a call to be successful. And so, yeah, that's what I would say about that. What have we learned from the struggle to free Maroon? So there's a lot about all of these fights for our political prisoners and those who have come home. So, we had the Move 9 that came home. We had Odinga who came home. We have now Maroon, and so I think that we have to, there's a two-pronged piece. There's the reality that this system, it's very frustrating that they can say yes and they can say no, right? We don't have the armed ability to just say, these are people and we're coming for them. And we haven't done the work to be empowered in a way to embody our power in a way that that threatens anything of theirs, so that we can leverage that to get what we want. So it's very frustrating that one day the judge could say no, and then a couple weeks later the judge could finally say yes, but could have said no. And and so we're subject to that, and that's one frustration. But at the same time, there was strategy, of course, in that process. And there were some gifts that came out of the first one being no and the second one being yes. One of the gifts was the ways that that the Department of Corrections unwillingness or inability to actually take care of aging and ailing prisoners was exposed. And that's something that of course the right is already wanting to fight against what happened and it continuing to happen. At the same time, we can use that in order to push the what we've been working on, because there are lawsuits that could happen as a result of this. People who have already lost family members to the medical neglect in the prison system can now have something on record in the courts to fight against, and that can apply pressure. Because one of the things that a lot of the legislators are really fighting to protect is the jobs that prisons provide for their community members who don't look like the people who are in the prisons and that's not part of their community. And so those jobs are now in jeopardy anyway as a result of this. And so we can begin to think about how we can leverage some of those things. Also, the truth-telling piece, I think, is important to think about, because we can be calling upon these police departments to they keep wanting to change the relationship that they have with our communities. And one of the things that that's happened, actually just happening in Philadelphia, is that they have a legislation now that remove lower level traffic stops, so that they are no longer allowed to stop people for a tail light or certain kinds of less significant, less substantial crimes or whatever. And so that's part of what they've established are stating as their goals for this, is to improve their relations. So if we can also start pushing them to understand that if you really want to improve the relations and you really are believing that you're different today than you were yesterday, you need to acknowledge who you were yesterday. And acknowledgement of who they have been, even if they don't want to fully acknowledge who they are right now, acknowledging who they have been, it creates a context and a framework for all these people who are our political prisoners and like why they were in there. So those, if that makes sense, if you understand what I'm saying. So those are a couple of things, but we just have to remember and recognize that, you know, they're trying to bring in new people. They're trying to get new people from our community. The whole thing with political prisoners is not only that it affects the voice and what people are able to do in the prisons, but it also affects with the rest, whatever organizer they put in prison, but it affects the rest of the community, because now we have to take resources from the other organizing that we're doing in order to actually be able to take and handle you know, fighting for our political prisoner. And when they release them, when they begin releasing them when they're aging, that also takes up resources. It takes resources around us making sure that they're taken care of. And of course, that's what we're going to do. But they realize that's what we're going to do because, of course, we're going to honor our elders who have had this fight. And at the same time, it still supports some of their strategy to lower our capacity in the overarching fight. And so just kind of knowing and recognizing all of those nuances and being able to think strategically. But one of the big important pieces is also building out the community. And that goes to like one of the things that we did in Philly, which is called the Curb Fest for Political Prisoners. The Curb Fest for Political Prisoners was organized, actually, Ty X on here was one of our young people who was the lead organizer of the Curb Fest for Political Prisoners. It was built off of an idea from Russ, actually, Russ Schultz III, Maroon's son, who wanted to do a Purge Fest for political prisoners that we enjoyed, and then we transformed that. And so Ty just dropped a link to that. But it's a way to bring people into the understanding. A lot of people in our community don't even know that there are such a thing as US political prisoners. So it's a way that we're able to, what we do is we set up DJ stations all around a community, a walkable area of the community, and we have information about various of our political prisoners at those stations. And we invite people to get involved through the DJ music and then to engage the information. And then as a result of that, potentially join the movement and let them know ways that they can join the movement. And so that's, you know, one of the kind of ways that we need to build our capacity. And so thinking creatively and not just spending our time like rallying with each other and preaching to the choir, but making sure that we're doing work to constantly be bringing new people in and connecting with people, having brochures, having flyers that we can hand to a person and say, and have a conversation with them and then leave them with information. Like those are things that we really have to do also as it relates to our political prisoners and all of the work that we're doing. So I hope that answers your question, you know, sufficiently, Joshua, as well.
Yes.
Awesome. And so Melinda, glad that you're back when I was just about to get to what you were asking. So I guess like things that have influenced, I think that, what is the DJ station? Could you explain that one more time? So so what we did is we went to different storefronts in a walkable distance, like all within a couple of blocks in one predominantly Black community in Philadelphia. And we asked each storefront to sponsor a DJ station, which meant that they would allow us to put a table or two in a tent outside where the DJ could DJ from. And then we had postcards. If you look at the site and you look on the page that says political prisoners, there are these cards, and each of those cards, we had them printed, and we had a number of them printed as postcards, and then we also had them printed as signs. And so the signs were up about like say 3 to 4 political prisoners in at each of the stations. So they got information about specific political prisoners. There was an organizer at each station that could talk to them, that stayed on the mic, that encouraged them to come, let them know what was going on, gave some political education, but it was all music. And so, you know, different DJs playing their different styles of music, and you can move around from one station to the next, and we're encouraged to move around from one station to the next. And we actually built this in a way that we are hoping that people will do this in their communities all around the country. So like by next month, Black August, we would love to see like there's Curb Fest happening everywhere. But you know, the information is available, and all a person has to do is complete a form. We just, you know, check them out. a little, make sure that they're not trying to use our information against us, but, you know, support people, give them access to the files so that they can take the research we've already done. And if you look at that page, you'll see 2 people that have the word liberated across, because since we did the Curb Fest on September 18th, 2 of our political prisoners have been liberated, Maroon and David Gilbride. So that's also really an important thing. And I can't wait until the Curb Fest. Is so hard to do because there's only 3 people left, but we're still gonna do it. And then like maybe by the time the Curb Fest is finished, you know, that year, there are no more people that of ours that are captured by the state. But so yeah, that's how the Curb Fest was. There's a lot of fun, and there's going to be one now coming up in Boston, and we've had people who have expressed interest in doing one in Oakland and Baltimore and DC and New York and Trenton. So we really are hoping that this will take off, and that's part of the thing that we have to do, is we have to be creative and really drawing on bringing our community into this fight, and by meeting them where they are, and everybody is where the music is, right? So that's the Curb Fest. But getting back to the things that have influenced changes I've made. So I think one of the things that I could name is what happened in 2020, not just the rebellion, but also the way watching firsthand the way that the rebellion was undermined, and really understanding how important it is to have a strong analysis of what you're dealing with. So, you know, and so like building around me a community of analysts, you know, who are really able to examine what's happening, what everybody's being, you know, what we're being subjected to, whether it's misinformation about Venezuela, misinformation about Cuba, whether it's, you know, stupid messages going out to the community, like Black Lives Matter Global Network's message saying we're moving from protest to the polls. Why would we move from protest to the polls? Why would that be a Black Lives Matter idea? Understanding what counterinsurgency is, really looking at how counterinsurgency works, really looking at activities that are happening in our communities and being able to see how we watched counterinsurgency in real time so that we can make sure that that doesn't happen anymore. You know, studying more, you know, deepening my study, and expanding. I mean, I love to read, but I hadn't made time for it. So just transforming so that I could read more has been another piece around that same thing. And then I think like really focusing on self-care as well. Like if we all die from our stress, then we don't accomplish anything either, right? If we shorten our lives, you know, because we haven't taken the time, we're not feeding ourselves well, or we're not getting proper rest, or we don't get to the ocean and we really need to see natural bodies of water, or whatever that is, like, then we're not actually, we're not setting good examples, and we're not modeling well. And so like, you know, self-care, I have a project called the Revolutionary Care Space. It's a space where I provide a room free of charge for organizers. I raise money to cover the costs of the rooms. And then I provide a safe space for organizers to come to, just to get away, to get a respite. You know, I bring people together to be able to like have organizer dinners with the organizing community to come together, or to go for nature walks together, and to like not only see each other when we're in fight mode and when we're responding to tragedy or responding to some sort of an urgent situation, but to also come together to love on each other, enjoy each other, and support each other's self-care. So I think those would be the things that, you know, I know that was like longer than 3 words, certainly, and 3 sentences, but I kind of tried to capture 3 ideas. And that's what I think, those are the things that I would, yeah. And accountability, the importance of accountability.
Word. I just want to thank you, and I want everybody, if we could just thank YahNé for all of this work that you're doing, for the analysis, for putting your own space up to support other activists and organizers, and just the work that we need to get done. And I'm really, you know, since I met you, I've like watched your organizing, and it's been inspiring to me, and been really supportive. So I just want to honor you for this work. And I think we need to honor each other more, and honor what you're doing for our communities without asking for, you know what I mean? So I just appreciate you and your friendship and what you're doing. And just, I love for everybody to just come on real quick and just thank YahNé for all the work that she's doing. So thank you, YahNé. And everyone, this is the end of our evening, but again, just sending out props to YahNé and asking folks to remember to one way of saying thank you is Venmoing. It's not the only way,
No.
right? But it's one of the ways, right? So keep doing. And I can't believe, like you just said, you just gave me new hope, because like I'm headed up that curve.
Yes, yes.
Well,
Love. People
know.
are always asking me. I think love is the thing. People always ask me how I like look so young, but I think that it's just because I really operate from love first and foremost, and I think that love is amazing. I actually have a song called "Love's Amazing." Well, it's called "Amazing," but the first line is "Love's amazing," and I think that it feeds you and it clothes you and it cares for you. So I think that's what it is. I think it's the love.
Ashe. Thank you all so much, and just want to encourage you all to support YahNé. And also here, I'm going to just repost all of the places where you can support YahNé. And give me one sec. And also encourage you all, every first Thursday of the month, there's a new radical truth teller, but I want you throughout the month to share the post on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and encourage your friends to support and just highlight this powerful work as an example of what can be done when people care about community and people. So I'm wishing you all just an amazing night and evening, thanking everyone for coming out. And do it.
Thanks. Sorry to step away for a second, but I don't want to cut off while you're saying goodbye. So I'm trying to get my computer on the charger before we go. But just really, I just want to say thank y'all. I think that it's really a beautiful idea to, where a lot of us are talking, and this is the self-care conversation, a lot of us are talking about the importance of giving people their flowers, while they're alive, and, and taking care of each other. And so, I just really appreciate the spirit of that. And, and just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Ashe, and everyone, God bless. Hoping the ancestors are watching you and you're walking with you. Have a good evening.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Be well.
Good night.
Bye.
That was dope. Very dope.
Thank you. All right, so are we done?
Yes.
We're done.
Yes.
All right.
We'll get something in the mail very soon. We've already put it in, so.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, it's from Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago, the fiscal sponsor. So,
Okay.
all right.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
y'all.
Let's be in touch.
Yeah, soon. Have a great night.
All right. Bye-bye.
Peace.